Can I use my tourist visa to stay in the US with my child who is an F1 student? The technical answer is yes, but like most things immigration, there's a bunch more to it than that. And the realistic answer is probably more like a maybe at best. So in this video, we'll talk about the details and the factors that would make this less likely or more possible. Hi, I'm Soyuna Tag. I'm an attorney and one of the founders of Simvisa. We release videos about US law, immigration, and other related topics. If this is of interest to you and you want to know more about how the law can better serve you, please subscribe. People refer to the B visa as the tourist visa. It's issued as a B1/B2 visa by the consulate, and when you arrive in the US, you're let in by the customs officer as a B1 if you're a temporary visitor for business, or a B2 if you're a temporary visitor for pleasure. But there are actually many different purposes where the B2 is appropriate beyond being a tourist or visiting people in the US for pleasure. It includes everything from coming for a medical purpose or medical treatment. We have a video just about that. To accompanying a household member who has a different visa, such as your child who has an F1, when you can't get that same or derivative visa to accompany them. For example, wouldn't it be great if you could just get the F2 visa based on your child's F1 so that you can stay with your child in the US during the entire period of their studies? But of course, as a parent of an F1, that's not possible because the F2 is only for the spouse and minor children of the F1 visa holder. And there's no such visa for a parent. And this is why the government's Foreign Affairs Manual specifically points out as an example that the accompanying parent of a minor F1 child student can potentially use the B2 instead to stay in the US with the child during their studies. This may sound pretty good so far, but the fact is, this use of the B2, not for the regular touristic purposes, but to accompany a minor F1 child and stay in the US for a longer period of time, is definitely not the norm and not common. Let me point out that on the official F1 international student website put out by the US government, that's studyinthestates.dhs.gov, with regards to kindergarten through 12th grade F1 students, they don't even mention the B2 possibility of parents accompanying and staying in the US with their minor F1 child student. Instead, they state that, quote, parents of children enrolled in a K through 12 school are not eligible to receive dependent status and enter the United States on an F2 or FM2 visa, which is true, and go on to provide pointers on how to prepare their kids to live in the US without them. So this may just be my impression, but parents of F1 students using the B2 to stay in the US with their minor F1 child student does not seem to be well recognized, let alone encouraged. So what are some factors that can either help you or hurt you in getting the B2 visa at the consulate or the B2 admission from the customs officer at the airport or other port of entry for this atypical purpose of staying in the US with your child through their studies? On the helpful side, you guys need to stand out from the vast majority of minor F1 international students because they do not have their parents with them in the US. One such distinguishing factor could be the age of the minor student. For example, in the US, it's very common for students to leave home to attend college. So even though an 18-year-old college freshman is still considered a minor child by US immigration, that's really very different than a third grader in elementary school. The uniqueness of the F1 program may also be a positive factor. For example, if the particular program is not available in the home country or nearby, and especially combined with the age of the child, that could help persuade the officer of the family's genuine non-immigrant intent. If the child has certain special needs, regardless of age, that may be a distinguishing factor that helps persuade the officer of the need for parent accompaniment. On the negative side, the usual issues of the officer believing that you do not have immigrant intent and that you do have enough financial resources for the length of your B2 stay are really magnified here. This also goes for your child's F1. It's a lot more challenging to establish non-immigrant intent, that you are here temporarily and that you have no intention of staying here once the purpose of your trip ends, when you're talking about months or years in the US instead of a 2-week vacation. Also, even when accompanying your F1 child is the B2 purpose, it doesn't change the requirement that you must maintain a residence abroad to which you intend to return. Your finances and living situation, again, a lot more challenging when you're talking about covering months or years of expenses instead of a 2-week vacation. So you need really strong finances to show that you can support both yourself and your student without resorting to any unauthorized work in the US. To make sure you're shored up and prepared for this as much as possible, or if you're not familiar with concepts like immigrant intent or showing strong ties to your home country, please see our videos on these topics covered in both the F1 videos. We have specific ones about finances and non-immigrant intent, as well as the B2 videos. Lastly, how long can you stay for? The typical tourist admission as a B2 is for 6 months. And for more details on the possible length and frequency of tourist stays in the US, please check out our video on that. But regarding our purpose, this is what the Foreign Affairs Manual advises consular officers. I quote, "If such individuals plan to stay in the United States for more than 6 months, you should advise them to ask Department of Homeland Security for a 1-year stay at the time they apply for admission. If needed, they may thereafter apply for extensions of stay in increments of up to 6 months for the duration of the principal's non-immigrant status in the United States. You should consider annotating the visa to indicate the purpose of travel and the length of stay in such cases." So what all that means is that assuming you have the B visa, when you present yourself to the customs officer, so most likely at the airport, you can request up to a maximum of 1 year instead of the typical 6 months of admission, if that's what makes sense with your child's F1. Thereafter, you can apply for 6-month extensions should you need to stay longer. However, practically speaking, I think it would be very challenging to establish non-immigrant intent to an officer, both to the consular officer at the B2 visa interview and to the customs officer when entering the US, if someone starts with, "I will stay and live in the US for 4 years while my child goes to high school." It probably strengthens your case to plan for shorter trips that correspond to the F1 school program. For example, you can plan to stay until the school's winter break or summer vacation and then return for the new term. And should it turn out that you need to stay longer and through the planned departure, you can then apply for 6-month extensions from inside the United States. It's definitely not a crime to have your plans change in this manner or for the pandemic to happen and for your plans to just go out the door. While it's not very well known that a parent can potentially accompany and stay with their minor F1 child through their studies in the United States, the government came to recognize this need. So while it's definitely not a common use of the B2 and has its challenges, it's definitely a possibility and one that may open up educational opportunities for you and your child. If you or someone you know are in this situation, I hope this gave you some insight into the sometimes mysterious ways of US immigration. If you found this helpful, please like the video, and for more like it, please subscribe. Also, please feel free to comment below about any topics that you'd like us to cover, as we're definitely looking at those for future videos. As always, I wish you a great visit to the US and a great rest of your day.